Hey guys, this is Jared. We're here with Andrew. He's back in office. Excited to have him back on the show. Wanted to go through today the difference between a couple different popular materials we have. One is King StarBoard, which we're using a lot of our tackle box construction, but also King Starlite. Andrew, can you kind of walk us through the differences between the two?
Sure. Yeah, so I've got a sheet of each here. And if I hold them up and set them side by side, you're going to see that there is absolutely zero difference. And that's because the material is obviously both extruded by King Plastics, and it has the exact same base material. So King StarBoard and King Starlite are the same base material. The only difference is that when Starlite is extruded, there is a blowing agent. There's some air that's added while it's extruded to create small air pockets inside the material. And they do that for a variety of reasons. One is weight savings, and the other being cost savings.
Okay. So you say that it's the same material, which is high density polyethylene,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So same composition. It's just there's less material per square foot.
There is, because you're injecting some air, and some air is taking up some space there. And really, the trade-off, or what you get, is on the surface, you don't even notice it at all.
Right.
But on the edges, when you cut it, you get these small air pockets. And I'll see if we can zoom in a little bit. I'll hold this up. You can see it. Get it nice and centered. Zoom in for me.
Hold it steady.
I know, don't move. So you can see, try to come in a little bit more here. Let's see. There we go. We're starting to get them. So there's some small air pockets that you can see in the edge of the end grain. And I'm going to let you hold that for a second, Jared, while I pick up the StarBoard.
I don't have a surgeon's hand, so we'll see.
All right. So we're going to put these side by side, and you can see how the Starlite has the little pockets in them.
So
right?
point to them what we're looking at here in the camera. I know it's probably reversed. So that is the Starlite there,
Yep.
right? And then on the other side, you have the StarBoard. And you can
Correct.
see a visible difference there for sure.
Absolutely. And I'll set the StarBoard down, and we'll talk about kind of the ramifications of that. The ramifications, we'll actually keep zoomed in. Let's come right here. So the ramifications is here, it doesn't look like that big of a deal. Let's get it focused. Here, it's not that big of a deal. But the challenge is that when that edge gets dirty, and I went out back before this, and we rubbed it in the dirt for 1 second, and you can see that's what the edge looks like, right? So Starlite is a fantastic material in that it saves weight, it saves cost, but you do end up with a cellular edge, and that cellular edge catches dirt and grime, and it doesn't leave you with a very attractive edge finish.
Okay. So, one of the things that I would ask, you said that the surface has the same kind of texture on it, right? So is it just the edge, or is it the same thing that's affected, or is only that blowing agent when it's extruded, the surface is the exact same 1-to-1, or does it retain dirt more on the surface as well?
Zero difference on the surface. The finished surface of Starlite is identical to the finished surface of StarBoard.
Okay.
And the cool thing is that allows us to use Starlite. I said I've gone straight to the negative without talking about too much about the positive, and I don't want to give the impression that we don't like Starlite or we don't use Starlite. We use a ton of Starlite.
Right.
But we use it for applications where we're able to hide the edge.
Okay.
So an obvious example would be like if I'm building a larger tackle box, I would definitely do the frame, the door, the drawer components all out of StarBoard. But I might do the shell of the tackle box out of King Starlite, because that shell mounts into the back of the fiberglass. You never see the shell.
It's recessed, it's hidden.
It's recessed,
The
it's
advantage
hidden.
is there's lower cost, lower weight into that box.
And it looks the same. You would never even be none the wiser. And maybe even the drawer bottom. You might do the drawer bottoms, which you don't see the drawer bottoms at all, out of Starlite. Another example would be we use some Starlite for things like upholstery substrates. If you're using it just as a structural material that you're going to upholster over, dude, it would be silly to use StarBoard. It's unnecessary. Starlite is a totally acceptable material, and cheaper and lighter.
So, one of the things we did before, and just to get some numbers, I'm going to kind of pop through these questions. You talk about using it as material or substrate for upholstery. Is it exactly the same from a rigidity standpoint?
So when you take away material, it definitely is not as rigid. It definitely does not hold a screw. Well, I say that. If you screwed 2 screws into it and did a proper test, I'm sure you would find that the Starlite doesn't hold a screw to the same degree as StarBoard does.
Right.
Same deal with rigidity. We found that it doesn't factor into our engineering considerations.
Like for a drawer bottom, it's not
No.
going to break out like an ABS if you get
No.
too much in there.
No,
right?
no.
It's still strong enough that it could hold weights, sinkers, anything along those lines.
Yeah, you don't see Starlite break, right? So yes, maybe it is slightly less structural from a rigidity standpoint. Probably does hold a screw less than StarBoard, but we've never seen that be prohibitive for using it in any kind of capacity like we've talked about here. We're using it for a tackle box or using it for a substrate or something like that.
So if you want to read out some of the weights that we talked about, like the difference between the two.
So, in general, one square foot of King StarBoard is about 2.5 pounds per square foot, and that varies a little bit because you do get some slight variance in material thicknesses for different runs, but as a very rough number you can consider about 2.5, whereas Starlite runs somewhere in the area of 1.8-ish. The one I measured here was 1.78 pounds, and that was for a square foot. So it's about 25% lighter, so a significant weight savings. If you said, hey, I don't care what this tackle box looks like, it can look like crap, build this whole big tackle box out of Starlite, you could be saving significant weight savings. Now, we don't do that because it's not practical. No one's going to put that on their boat. But if you can build the whole shell and the drawer bottoms and all the innards that connect but are hidden out of Starlite, there can be considerable weight savings over the course of a bigger piece.
And we see that, right? I mean, you get a lot of questions for people that are looking to do a custom tackle box with us, or even some of the production units that are on our website. One of the questions that we get quite frequently is, how much does this weigh, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about displacement on a boat and knowing where to put this or that, right? If everything's towards the back of the boat, it's not going to ride correctly. So you're taking something that's a cooler that probably weighed 30-40 pounds without ice in it and putting in this large tackle box. That's important.
Absolutely. The one other advantage besides weight savings is price, right? So with plastics, in general, the less raw material they have to use because they're injecting air, you have some price savings as well. Just comparing the cut to size prices on boat outfitters, it's in the area of 15% less expensive for Starlite compared to StarBoard. So while it's not really practical for us to do whole tackle units out of Starlite to save money because it looks bad, if you were a boater who function and price were what matters, I need it to work and I'm trying to get this thing real cheap, and I don't care if my cutting board looks like all dirty on the side after one trip,
right?
You can save money going to Starlite, and I wouldn't argue anyone against that, besides just understand what you're doing and what you're getting yourself into.
So from trying to trade out different options, I mean, is it a 1-to-1? I know we offer a ton of different colors of StarBoard and thicknesses.
So you are limited. You are limited on the colors. We have black and white. The white matches our white StarBoard, but there's not an Arctic white, an off-white, a seafoam color. King can extrude those colors, but there are some limits on the minimum production run to do that. In fact, I think we have a bunch of 3/4 inch Arctic white that we did for a special order that I can make a deal for anyone that's Arctic white Starlite. But yeah, in general, it's white, which are bright white, and
normal
and
thickness is 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch.
No, it's pretty much 1/2 inch.
That's
we don't get into a lot of 3/4. That's to be a unique and specific application. I believe. Let me double check. I could be wrong. There might be 3/4. Let's switch back over to the.
So one of the things where we talked about the cellular edge on a black, I mean, it's not going to make any difference there, right? If you went with a black, having that extra cellular edge from a dirty or staying clean, you're not seeing that.
I would agree with that to a degree. It's a way, and real quick, just to finish the thought, there is 3/4 thick. I misspoke. I'm absolutely wrong.
So
about
1/2 and 3/4
1/2 and 3/4. But yeah, the quarter you wouldn't do. I would agree that the black Starlite, it's way less of an issue. Yeah, absolutely. I would say that you can still see it, even looking at this picture. And it does not look like as solid, as finished of a material as your black StarBoard would. Let's get that loaded up here. I would argue that there still is a difference in the quality and the look of the edge, but it's certainly less of an issue compared to
cleanliness,
white cleanliness, for sure.
Cool. So we kind of went through like some of the things that we use it for here. Can you spout off any options out there of people? We talked about shells of boxes, but what else would you think that if down the road a customer was looking for an HDPE, that you would go with this versus that, right? So lower weight. What else? What else can you think of?
Really, it's limited to anything that you're going to cap the edge.
Okay.
Which, gosh, if you're doing shelving, but the edge was somehow capped on all the edges, and the front had some kind of keeper strip that covered it,
or like a fascia that went across the front to block it.
As long as it was capped on the sides. One thing I will say that I've seen, and I won't call out any specific retailers, but I have seen at some sporting goods stores some people, and I don't know if they're doing this here in the States or overseas, who sell some accessories, some like horizontal rod holders and some different pontoon rod holders, that the material looks just like it's StarBoard, but the material is absolutely, when you look at the edge, a Starlite or some material similar to Starlite, and that if you look at the edge of the material, it is totally cellular. You can see it, and I always cringe when I see that, because I just know that someone's going to put that on their boat and it's going to look dirty.
Right.
You have my word and the word of boat outfitters and TKIL that we don't ever use Starlite in an application where the edge is going to be visible and it's going to be dirty. And if we did a custom project, we would never use that unless for some reason that was explicitly requested by the customer. So it's definitely something to keep an eye out. There are some retailers that do that.
Right. Awesome. So looks like we've got some comments. Do you want to switch back over here to full screen?
Sure.
We'll kind of go through those real quick. What do you got?
So I've got Sarah asked, what's the actual weight difference between the two? We talked about that. That's perfect. Can it break? And if so, does it snap or bend when compared to StarBoard? So Jeff asked that question, and it's a good one. I have never heard of StarBoard ever breaking, with the exception of I've heard of like an overloaded bow pulpit once. I've heard of it breaking, and sometimes you get a little bit of spidering on the edge if you drill a mounting hole just way too close to the edge. It doesn't break, it just spiders a little bit there, so you want to be careful about that. I would expect the sensitivity for that happening for Starlite to be more likely, but I haven't seen it. I've never heard of that. We don't really use it in places where it's hugely structural.
And does it like shatter? I mean, the case for the bow pulpit doesn't shatter, it just kind of snaps in half.
Yeah, and I got to imagine that thing was bending for a long time before it snapped, because StarBoard really doesn't break. It'll flex on you. We use it for things like deck hatches, and I tell people it'll feel a little bit spongy. You step on it and it's like, whoa, that moves a little bit, but it's not a thing where it's going to break unless something just totally extreme happened to it. You just don't see it, and Starlite really is the same way.
Similar property, just less, right?
Yeah. In any application we've ever used it, it's never been an issue or a consideration. So, get Sarah. We talked about the StarBoard and dirt. Fred, what adhesives can I use to bond either of these products? I love that question. It's a loaded question. It's a controversial question. From our perspective, there are not any adhesives that work to create a permanent bond gluing StarBoard or Starlite together. That's not to say that if you took this whole piece and you glued it to fiberglass and you put a bunch of adhesive onto the face of it and glued it against the panel of your fiberglass, that it wouldn't stay there. But that you couldn't say do a joint and join these two where you only have adhesive right here and here and expect to assemble a box by gluing it together. We don't have any adhesives that we would trust to that degree. We don't have any adhesives that we use for any structural applications. It is all mechanical fasteners that we would use in that application.
Right. That is a good question.
It is.
What about one of the things that kind of piggybacks off of that is that we offer the HDPE welding rods, right? Mm-hmm. Are you able to use similar? I mean, StarBoard, Starlite, be able to do the same thing? Can you weld that together? I know we wouldn't recommend it as much as mechanically fastening it,
sure,
but would it all work the same way?
No, I will quadruple, triple check, but I would say I'm 99% sure that Starlite would weld exactly like StarBoard. It's the same material. It's really just has this blowing agent that's added. So yes, you can weld it. Welding is equally or potentially even stronger than a mechanical fastener. It's just a little bit Well, one, it's labor intensive, and two, it's ugly. When you weld metal, you're able to come back and grind down that. Then you powder coat over it, and that weld, looks fine. You don't even hardly see it in some cases. You don't have that luxury with StarBoard. You weld it, and it kind of is what it is. You're really not going to go back and like sand and grind that out. So I've always seen when people try to weld StarBoard, that if it's an invisible application, it's not ideal and doesn't look the best.
Awesome.
We have another really good question. So is Starlite same as PVC board? And no, right? It's not. I'm going to switch back over here, and I'll look at the different plastic sheets.
So as you're pulling that up, that's actually a really good point. A lot of people will call in, shout out to our upholstery people or somebody who's going to be doing, reupholstering a seat on a boat. They'll call in and they're looking for StarBoard, right? This is a way that StarBoard 100% in that application is unnecessary. You would use Starlite, right? Because you're completely covering that material just as like a substrate. So you wouldn't spend the money, you'd save 15% and go with Starlite. Also with the expanded PVC, that's another option, which is different.
Sure. So PVC has a lot of, first of all, this is a high-density polyethylene. Starlite, like you said, StarBoard and Starlite are both high-density polyethylenes. Starlite is a high-density polyethylene that's extruded with some air when it's extruded to make it lighter. Expanded PVC is a PVC that is also expanded. And I'm an expert in what we do, cutting material and turning small, big sheets into component parts. I'm not an expert in plastics, so I'm speaking with.
That's where I come in.
Yeah, I'm speaking with a degree of expertise associated with what we do, right? But my understanding is that expanded PVC is also has a blowing agent when it's expanded, and so instead of solid PVC, you have expanded PVC, and it's used for everything from, of course, irrigation pipes to sign boards.
Right.
And you can have different degrees of blowing agent added so that different PVCs have different rigidities. Some can be very close to solid, some can be very flexible because there's a lot of air that's injected. So we use expanded PVC in a lot of similar applications to Starlite, except I would consider it a slight step down from both, again, a weight and a cost perspective. It's even cheaper than Starlite. It's even lighter than Starlite. But it's
even less rigid than Starlite.
It is a lot. You start to get to where can expanded PVC break? It can break. Do you see it break? You will see it break.
Right.
So maybe if it was being used for it's okay. You can bend expanded PVC, which is nice. So we see for some substrate applications, we'll bend expanded PVC for like an armrest, right? If there's an armrest that we bend that we sell to a boat builder that they upholster over, and that's the substrate for their armrest. You can't bend Starlite just like you can't bend StarBoard. So that's kind of the pros and cons on why you might use one versus the other, but they are a very different material.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, I don't see any other questions.
Yeah, so on our side, if you want to switch back over, no more comments. The thing that we always try to do is make sure you guys know we're here to help, right? The big motto of Boat Outfitters, the vision that's been created is, when you call us, you're better for doing so. Either we have it or we're going to point you in the right direction. If there's something that's specific to this segment that we didn't cover, please comment below. We've got somebody monitoring social media that'll be able to get you back an answer that hopefully will be able to help somebody else down the road as well. We've got a whole team of people that sit across that wall that are here from 8 to 5 that answer the phone every single day, that are here to help you and find out information to make sure you're making the right decision both on your boat or whatever project you're working on. Again, we always appreciate you guys stopping by, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.